I called off my wedding because of a dog, and now I'm alone and stalking his Instagram, watching another woman live the life I threw away. The silence in this penthouse is deafening. Every time I walk across these polished marble floors, the click of my heels reminds me that I am utterly alone. 3 months ago, I thought I was a hero. I convinced myself I was a martyr for the high-value woman movement. I sat in this very living room, surrounded by my girls, sipping champagne and celebrating the fact that I had finally called off my wedding to Mark. At the time, I felt like a queen reclaiming her throne. I felt powerful. I felt justified. But today, looking at the pristine, untouched white velvet of my sofa, I realized I didn't win a victory. I just built myself a very expensive, very lonely cage. Before I tell you exactly what I saw in that park that broke me, I need you to be the jury. Most people will tell me I'm heartless, but I want to see if there's anyone here who actually understands why I did it. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever walked away from something perfect for a reason nobody else got. It's time we find out if I'm really the villain or just the only one with standards. The reason for the breakup sounds so small when I say it out loud now, but at the time, it was my entire world. It was a golden retriever named Barnaby. To the rest of the world, Barnaby was just a dog. To Mark, he was a son. To me, he was a rival. I told everyone who would listen that it was about boundaries and respect. I told my therapist that Mark's dog-dad energy was a red flag for emotional immaturity. But if I'm being honest with myself in the dark of this apartment, it wasn't about boundaries. It was about a $900 custom dog tuxedo and my own massive, fragile ego. The fight that ended everything happened during our final wedding rehearsal. We were in the foyer of the estate we had rented for the ceremony. Mark walked in, beaming, holding a garment bag. He unzipped it with the kind of excitement most men save for a new car. Inside was a miniature, hand-tailored tuxedo, complete with a silk bow tie and a little ring-bearer pouch. He wanted Barnaby to stand as his best man. He wanted the dog to walk down the aisle, sit at the head table, and be in every single professional photo. I snapped. I remember the heat rising in my neck as I looked at that ridiculous piece of fabric. I told him it was tacky. I told him it would ruin the editorial aesthetic of our black tie wedding. I told him that our guests, people of status, people I wanted to impress, would laugh at us. Mark didn't get angry. He didn't even raise his voice. He just looked at me with this profound, quiet sadness and asked, "Why does his presence take anything away from you?" I didn't have an answer that didn't make me sound like a narcissist, so I doubled down. I gave him the ultimatum. I stood there, draped in a $3,000 silk trench coat, and told him it was the dog or me. I thought for sure he would fold. I was his fiancé. I was the woman he had spent 3 years chasing. I was the one who curated his life, his wardrobe, and his social circle. There was no way he would choose a creature that sheds and barks over me. But he did. He didn't even hesitate. He looked at Barnaby, then looked back at me, and said, "If you can't love the things that I love, then you don't really love me. You just love the version of me you can control." I'll never forget the look in his eyes in that moment. It wasn't hatred. It was realization. I felt a surge of adrenaline, that toxic power that comes when you realize you've reached the point of no return. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I took off my 2-carat engagement ring and threw it onto his mahogany desk. It made a sharp, metallic clatter that echoed through the room. I walked out like a character in a movie, convinced that he would be calling me within the hour, sobbing and begging for forgiveness. He never called. Instead of mourning, I went on the offensive. I posted on TikTok about choosing yourself. I made videos about identifying toxic dog-dad energy and how unreasonable it is for men to prioritize pets over partners. I got thousands of likes. My comments were filled with women telling me I was a queen, that I had dodged a bullet, and that I was an inspiration for setting such high standards. I fed on that validation for weeks. It was a high that kept me from feeling the coldness of my empty bed. I convinced myself that my life was better now. It was cleaner. It was quieter. There was no more dog hair on my aesthetic furniture. No more muddy paw prints on the hardwood. My home was a museum of perfection. But last night, the pride finally vanished, and reality hit me like a physical blow. I was driving past our favorite park, the one where we used to spend our Sunday mornings. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. And there he was. He wasn't alone. He was with a girl who, from a distance, looked exactly like me. She had the same long, blonde hair and the same slim build. But as I slowed the car down, I saw the difference. She was kneeling in the dirt. She wasn't worried about her outfit or her brand. She was laughing, her face glowing with a genuine, unbridled joy as Barnaby jumped all over her, licking her face and wagging his tail so hard his whole body shook. Mark was standing over them, and he was looking at her with a warmth he hasn't shown me in years. It was a look of pure, relaxed adoration. There was no tension in his shoulders. No fear of saying the wrong thing. No walking on eggshells to avoid triggering my standards. He looked like a man who was finally home. In that moment, the truth shattered me. I realized I never actually hated the dog. Barnaby was a good dog. He was loyal and sweet. I hated that I wasn't the absolute, undisputed center of Mark's universe. I was so insecure that I viewed a golden retriever as a threat to my dominance. I sacrificed a man who would have died for me, a man who was stable, successful, and kind, because I was too obsessed with an aesthetic to allow any mess into my life. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror and didn't recognize the woman looking back. I saw someone who was polished, perfectly made up, and entirely hollow. I had won the argument. I had kept my furniture clean. I had maintained my standards. But what did it get me? I went home to my penthouse, the one I insisted on moving into because his house smelled like dog. I sat on my spotless white sofa and waited for the feeling of empowerment to come back. It didn't. I scrolled through my old TikToks, the ones where I bragged about leaving him, and for the first time, the comments didn't feel like validation. They felt like a joke. All those strangers cheering for my strength weren't there to hold me while I cried. They weren't there to share a life with me. They were just passing time, consuming my drama while I was busy destroying my future. I realized that while I was busy being refined and high-end, this new girl was busy being happy. She didn't care about the $900 tuxedo. She probably thinks it's cute. She doesn't care about the dog hair. She probably thinks it's a small price to pay for the way Mark looks at her. She understood something I was too proud to learn. Love isn't a curated gallery. It's messy, it's inconvenient, and sometimes, it comes with a golden retriever. I tried to text him. I spent 3 hours staring at my phone, typing and deleting messages. I miss you. I'm sorry. Can we talk about Barnaby? In the end, I sent a simple, "Hey, I saw you today. You look happy." He never replied. He didn't even give me the satisfaction of a seen receipt. He has moved into a world where I no longer exist, a world filled with laughter, muddy paws, and unconditional loyalty. I am sitting here now, staring at my beautiful, expensive, spotless furniture. There isn't a single stray hair to be found. There are no scratches on the floor. Everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. My life is a perfect, filtered photo. And I have never been more miserable. I traded a soulmate for a vacuumed floor, and now I have to live with the silence. I am the girl who had everything and threw it away because I couldn't share the spotlight with a dog. To anyone watching this, don't be like me. Don't confuse standards with ego. Don't let your aesthetic become your coffin. Because once the likes fade and the video loops, you're the one who has to sleep in the quiet. And believe me, the silence is much louder than the barking ever was. I used to brag that I had the highest standards in my friend group, but those standards just left me sitting single at 30 in a house that feels more like a tomb than a home. Mark was everything on paper, 6'3", wealthy, successful, and utterly obsessed with me. For 3 years, I was the sun he orbited around. He bought the jewelry, he booked the 5-star vacations, and he looked at me like I was the only woman on earth. But he was also obsessed with his dog, Barnaby. At first, I played along because I thought I could eventually train the dog out of our lives, or at least to the sidelines. I was wrong. The unreasonable breaking point happened at our final wedding tasting, an event that should have been the happiest day of our engagement. We were at this exclusive, high-end venue that cost $60,000 just to secure the date. Everything was white lilies, crystal glassware, and hushed luxury. We were sitting there with the executive chef, discussing the 5-course artisanal menu, when Mark dropped the bomb. He didn't just want Barnaby at the wedding, he insisted the chef prepare a miniature, salt-free Wagyu steak for Barnaby to be served on a silver platter right at the head table. Between us. During our first meal as husband and wife. I snapped. The sound of my fork hitting the china felt like a gunshot in that quiet room. I looked at Mark, this man I was supposed to grow old with, and all I saw was an obstacle to my perfect image. I told him he was a freak. I told him that the dog was just an animal, a beast that sheds on the rugs and licks its own paws, and I refused to be upstaged by it on the most important night of my life. I screamed that I wasn't going to be the dog girl and that my wedding was about me, not a golden retriever. I canceled the venue that night, right in front of the horrified coordinator. I felt like a queen reclaiming her throne, finally purging the mess from my royal life. But the throne is freezing cold. It's been months, and that rush of power has curdled into something bitter and heavy. I've spent the last 4 hours in the dark, the blue light of my phone burning my eyes as I stalk his new girlfriend's Visco. It's a special kind of torture. She's gorgeous in that effortless, annoying way, minimal makeup, messy hair, oversized hoodies. She's the definition of low maintenance, a term I used to use as an insult but now realize is a superpower. She just posted a grainy, candid photo of the 3 of them at a lake. Mark is soaking wet, laughing harder than I ever saw him laugh with me, and Barnaby is resting his head on her lap. The caption simply says, family. I'm sitting here in my $1,200 designer robe, clutching a glass of expensive wine that tastes like ash, realizing that while I was busy being refined, she was busy being loved. I spent our entire relationship trying to polish Mark, trying to sand down his edges and remove the parts of his life that didn't fit my aesthetic. I thought that by demanding he choose me over everything else, I was proving my worth. I thought the ultimatum was a sign of strength. Now I see it was just a sign of my own emptiness. I wanted a trophy husband in a sterile environment, and I got exactly what I asked for, a sterile environment with no husband in it. The silence in this apartment is aggressive. There are no paw prints on the floor, no dog toys under the sofa, and no man in the kitchen. Everything is exactly where I want it to be, and I hate it. I realized too late that Mark's devotion to that dog wasn't a sign of weakness or freakishness. It was a sign of how deeply he could care for something. He was a man with an infinite capacity for loyalty, and I tried to punish him for it. I thought I was too good for a messy life, but a life without mess is just a life without living. Last night, in a moment of pure, pathetic weakness, I did the one thing I promised I'd never do. I sent him a text. Just 3 words, I miss you. For 5 years, Mark never let a text of mine go unanswered for more than 2 minutes. He used to apologize if he took 10 minutes to reply while he was in a meeting. But tonight, the bubbles never appeared. He didn't reply. He didn't even heart the message. For the first time, the silence from his end was absolute. I'm the one who threw the ring. I'm the one who canceled the wedding. I'm the one who walked out and told him he wasn't enough. So why do I feel like the one who was dumped? The truth is, he didn't lose me, I lost him. I lost the Wagyu steak dinners and the 6'3" protector and the man who would have moved mountains for me if I hadn't been so obsessed with the dirt on his boots. I'm looking at my reflection in the darkened TV screen and I don't see a queen. I see a woman who valued a concept over a person. I see someone who won the battle for her standards but lost the entire war for her happiness. He found someone who doesn't mind the hair on the sofa or the dog at the table, because she's smart enough to know that those things are just the background noise of a happy life. I want to call him and scream that it's not fair. I want to tell him that she's just a rebound, that she doesn't know him like I do. But then I look at that photo again, the way he's looking at her, the way he's holding Barnaby's collar. He looks free. He looks like a man who finally stopped being managed and started being appreciated. I'm the villain of this story, the one who tried to gatekeep love and ended up locked out of the garden. I have my highest standards, I have my designer robes, and I have my 30-year-old birthday coming up in a week with no one to blow out the candles with. I traded a soul for a sterile room, and the silence is the only thing talking back to me now. There is a specific type of regret that hits you at 2:00 a.m. when the world is silent and you realize you are the villain of your own story. It's a cold, sharp realization that cuts through the ego you've spent months carefully constructing. Everyone cheered when I left Mark. My bridesmaids, my mother, even my coworkers, they all called him delusional. They rallied around me when I told them he wanted his golden retriever, Barnaby, to be the ring bearer in a historic cathedral. We laughed over martinis about how insane it was to suggest an animal walk down a velvet-lined aisle. I agreed with every mocking word. I wanted a wedding that looked like a Vogue editorial, a masterpiece of white marble, candlelight, and sophisticated silence. I didn't want a PetSmart ad. I didn't want the risk of a bark interrupting my vows or a wet nose ruining my custom lace gown. I remember the night I gave him the final ultimatum. We were packing for what should have been our honeymoon in the Maldives. I told him, with a flat, cold voice, that if he didn't put Barnaby in a kennel for the duration of our trip, there wouldn't be a marriage to celebrate. I told him that I was tired of sharing our milestones with a creature that didn't understand them. Mark didn't scream. He didn't throw things. He just sat on the edge of the bed, petting Barnaby's head, and told me that he couldn't start a life with someone who viewed his loyalty as a nuisance. He chose the dog. I laughed in his face. I actually stood there and mocked him, telling him he'd be a lonely, pathetic old man living in a house full of dog hair while I went on to find someone who actually understood status. I moved into my own place that weekend, convinced I had one. But the joke is on me. Yesterday, the air was crisp and the sun was hitting the pavement just right. I was walking down a side street when I saw a sight that stopped my heart. Mark was sitting outside a small, sun-drenched cafe. He looked younger, more relaxed than I had seen him in years. And he wasn't alone. There was a girl sitting across from him, someone effortless, someone who wasn't checking her reflection in the window every 5 seconds. She was laughing, her head tilted back, and with one hand, she was feeding Barnaby a piece of her croissant. Barnaby's tail was thumping against the pavement, a rhythmic sound of pure contentment. They looked like a photograph of a life I could have had if I hadn't been so obsessed with the frame. There were no arguments over the vibe. There was no ego-driven power struggle. There was just joy. It was a messy, crumbs on the table, dog hair on the jeans kind of joy. I stood there, hidden behind my designer sunglasses, and realized that Mark wasn't the delusional one. I was. I thought I was too good for a life that was messy, but standing there on that sidewalk, I realized that messy was actually living. I had spent our entire relationship trying to sanitize him, trying to scrub away the parts of him that didn't fit into my curated vision of a perfect life. I treated his capacity for love as if it were a defect. Now, I'm back in my apartment, staring at my perfectly curated Instagram feed, and I hate every single photo. Every image is a lie. Every post is a testament to a woman who chose a color palette over a soulmate. My grid is aesthetically flawless, all neutral tones, sharp lines, and expensive shadows, but it's empty. There is no life in these pictures because I didn't allow any life to happen. I traded a husband for a cohesive aesthetic. I traded a man who would have stood by me through anything for the sake of a wedding ceremony that would have lasted 4 hours. The silence here is heavy. It's the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat, reminding you that you're the one who closed the door. I thought I was reclaiming my power, but I was just performing for an audience that doesn't exist. My friends aren't here at 2 a.m. My followers aren't here to keep me warm. It's just me and my standards, sitting in a room where nothing ever gets out of place because nothing ever moves. I won the battle for the cathedral, but I lost the person who made the cathedral worth standing in. I think about that girl at the cafe. She probably didn't care about the ring bearer. She probably doesn't care if Barnaby sheds on her bed or if Mark's car smells like the outdoors. She's smart enough to know that a man who loves a dog that much is a man who knows how to stay. I had that loyalty in the palm of my hand, and I crushed it because it didn't look high-end enough. I am sitting in my designer robe, looking at my spotless floors, and I would give anything to hear the click-clack of paws across the hardwood. I would give anything to see a stray hair on my white sofa. I'm the girl who chose a Vogue editorial over a heartbeat. I'm the villain who walked away from a good man because he had a good heart that he shared with a dog. Now, Mark is living a life full of laughter and croissants and unconditional love, and I'm just a woman with a very beautiful, very dead Instagram feed. I traded the sun for a spotlight, and now that the show is over, I'm sitting in the dark, realizing that the mess I was so afraid of was actually the only thing that was real, and a future built on shared dreams. A year ago that I'd lose my fiancé over a save-the-date card, I would have laughed in your face. But that is the reality I am waking up to every single morning in this pristine, silent house. A 6. Mark was the man I was supposed to marry, but in my head, I wasn't just marrying a man, I was building a brand. I was curating a lifestyle that had no room for anything less than perfection. The conflict started so innocently. We were planning our engagement shoot, and Mark came to me with an idea that made my skin crawl. He wanted Barnaby, his golden retriever, in the photo. He had even bought a little wooden sign for the dog to wear around his neck that said, "My humans are getting married." He was so proud of it. He showed it to me with that boyish grin, expecting me to find it charming. Instead, all I saw was a disaster. I saw a tacky prop that would ruin the high-fashion, minimalist aesthetic I had planned for our announcement. I told him it was cheap. I told him it looked like something off a bargain craft site and that it would ruin my brand. We fought for 3 days. It wasn't just a bicker, it was a war of ideologies. I told him that as a couple, we needed to be refined. I used that word like a weapon, over and over, until it lost its meaning. I told him that I couldn't marry someone who was so willing to settle for cliché and immature antics. I was so convinced that my taste was a sign of my superiority. I thought that by demanding he remove the dog from our public image, I was leveling us up. On the 3rd night, I looked him in the eye and told him I couldn't marry a man who didn't understand the importance of image. I walked away with my head held high, the click of my heels on the floor sounding like a victory march. I spent the next week waiting. I sat in my apartment, phone in hand, waiting for the inevitable "I'm sorry" text. I was so sure he would crawl back. I thought he'd realize that a life with a high-value woman like me was worth more than a silly photo with a pet. I was waiting for him to admit that I was right and that his dog-dad quirks were something he needed to outgrow. But the apology never came. The silence from his end wasn't a negotiation tactic, it was a departure. He didn't fight to change my mind because he realized my heart was already closed. Now, a year later, the refinement I fought so hard for feels like a death sentence. I've spent the last hour scrolling, a habit I know is destroying me, but I can't stop. I saw a video of them today, Mark and the girl who replaced me. They were hiking up in the mountains, the kind of trip I would have refused because of the dirt and the lack of cell service. The video was messy. The lighting was terrible. The girl was covered in actual mud, Her hair was a disaster, and she was doubled over laughing while Barnaby jumped all over her, leaving paw prints on her white jacket. A year ago, I would have judged her. I would have looked at that video and felt a smug sense of pity. I would have told my friends that she had no self-respect for letting herself look like that or for letting an animal ruin her clothes. I would have called her low maintenance as a slur. But looking at her face in that grainy footage, I don't feel superior. I feel a crushing, suffocating envy. She has something I will never have again, Mark's undivided loyalty. She has the warmth of a man who doesn't have to perform for her. She has the joy of a life that is allowed to be loud, dirty, and real. I am sitting here in my pristine living room, where every pillow is chopped and every candle is unlit because I don't want to ruin the wax. It is perfectly quiet. There is no dog hair on the rugs. There are no scratches on the furniture. There is no one here to tell me I look beautiful when I'm a mess, because I never allow myself to be a mess. I won the argument about the save the date card. I kept my brand intact. I kept my reputation as a woman of refined taste. But I lost the only person who actually cared about the woman behind the brand. I realize now that my obsession with being refined was just a cage I built for myself. I was so afraid of being tacky that I became cold. I was so afraid of being cheap that I became hollow. Mark wasn't being immature, he was being human. He wanted to celebrate the things he loved, and I treated his love like a blemish that needed to be covered up. I treated Barnaby like a prop I could edit out of the frame, forgetting that the dog was part of the heart I was supposedly marrying. I would give anything to hear the sound of paws on my hardwood floor right now. I would give my entire wardrobe just to have a reason to own a lint roller again. I would take 1,000 tacky photos if it meant I could have one more Sunday morning with a man who loved me enough to want me in his world. I thought I was winning when I walked away. I thought I was showing him my worth. But you don't show your worth by tearing down the things your partner treasures. You just show your own smallness. I'm staring at my refined life, and it looks like a museum. It's beautiful to look at, but you can't live in it. It's a monument to my own pride. Mark is out there in the mud, in the chaos, in the laughter, and he's finally with someone who doesn't think his heart is tacky. I won the argument, I kept my dignity, and I kept my standards. But I lost the war for my own happiness, and I did it all for a piece of cardstock that no one would have remembered anyway. Now, the only thing I have to show for my high standards is a silent house and the realization that I am the one who is truly unrefined. I am officially the girl who chose a clean aesthetic over a soulmate, and the regret is eating me alive. If you spend any time on the lifestyle side of social media, you probably saw my breakup go viral. I was the one everyone was talking about, the girl who walked away from a 5-year relationship over a dog bed. At the time, I posted about it with such a sense of self-righteousness. I told my followers that I was protecting my peace and my vision. I made videos about not settling and aligning your environment with your goals. I looked into the camera with perfect makeup and told thousands of strangers that if a man doesn't respect your architectural vision, he doesn't respect you. I felt like a pioneer of the clean girl movement. But now, the filters are off, and I'm sitting in the wreckage of my own making. The conflict started when we were designing our dream home. Mark and I had saved for years, and we finally bought a $2 million modern farmhouse. It was supposed to be our forever. I had every square inch mapped out in my mind, minimalist lines, neutral tones, and white oak everything. Then, Mark came to me with a blueprint for a dog suite. He wanted to turn the large sunlit nook under the main staircase into a custom-built, built-in bedroom for Barnaby. He had plans for a miniature Dutch door, integrated feeding stations, and custom upholstery that matched the rest of the house. He was so excited to give his best friend a home within a home. I hated it instantly. To me, it wasn't a sweet gesture, it was a blemish. I told him it ruined the flow of the architecture. I argued that a dog belongs in a mudroom or a laundry room, hidden away where guests wouldn't see the clutter of his existence. We fought about that small square of space for weeks. I made it a hill to die on. I gave him an ultimatum that I was certain would work: the dog lives in the mudroom, or I leave. I was so arrogant. I genuinely believed that no man in his right mind would choose a golden retriever over a $2 million estate and a woman like me. I thought my value was so high that he would eventually realize how irrational he was being and bow to my aesthetic authority. He didn't. He looked at me with a hollow expression I had never seen before and said, "If you're willing to walk away from our future over a place for my dog to sleep, then you were never really in this with me." He chose the dog. He chose the mess. He chose his loyalty to a creature that loved him unconditionally over a woman who loved him conditionally. Now, I'm living in a much smaller house, by myself, and I am forced to watch him build that dream home with someone else. It is a special kind of hell to see your own dreams realized by a stranger. This new girl, who is younger, softer, and clearly less obsessed with perfection, is posting day-in-the-life vlogs from the house that was supposed to be mine. And the centerpiece of her content? The dog suite. She's shown videos of herself painting the tiny Dutch door a soft sage green. She's posted clips of her and Mark laughing as they install a miniature chandelier inside Barnaby's little room. She looks so genuinely happy. But more importantly, Mark looks relieved. He looks like a man who has finally been allowed to exhale. The realization hit me like a physical weight. My standards were never about quality or refinement. They were a mask for my own deep-seated insecurity. I couldn't handle the fact that I wasn't the only thing in the world that Mark loved. I viewed a dog's bed as a threat to my dominance. I wanted to be the sole architect of his happiness, and if I couldn't control every aspect of his environment, I felt powerless. I destroyed a beautiful, rare connection because I was jealous of a golden retriever. I was so busy trying to curate a vibe that I forgot to build a life. There's a detail about Mark I haven't told you yet, a reason why this regret feels like a physical weight. But before I reveal the final sting, if you've felt the chill of a quiet house like I am right now, drop a like to let me know I'm not the only one haunting my own life. Subscribing is the only way to make sure you don't miss the update when I tell you what happened when I finally called him. I have my perfect house now. It's smaller, but it is exactly what I thought I wanted. The floors are flawless. The walls are perfect, sterile white. There is no dog hair, no smell of the outdoors, and no tacky custom pet furniture. It is a museum of my own pride. But as I walk through these quiet rooms, I realize that a museum is just a place where dead things are kept on display. There is no warmth here. There is no laughter. There is no one to share the perfect view with. I am just a bitter memory in Mark's past now, the girl who cared more about a floor plan than a family. He has moved into the light, and I am stuck in a loop of my own making, scrolling through vlogs of a woman who was smart enough to know that a home is built on love, not clean aesthetics. I won the argument. I saved the architecture. But I lost the only person who made the house worth living in. I'm a queen of a very small, very empty castle, and the silence is the only thing that lives here with me. But be honest with me, if he was willing to lose a $2 million future over a dog's sleeping arrangements, was he ever actually in love with me, or was the dog just his excuse to leave? Am I the only one who thinks unconditional love is just a fancy word for a lack of boundaries? Or am I just the bitter girl in a clean apartment? Roast me in the comments, I can take it.